Hello everyone, my name is Weston Nelson. I'm excited to share my last opportunity with you guys today. Today my topic is GASB Codification 6. It has to do with fund accounting and specifically talks about the uses and governance of the 9 different types of government funds. Today I'll be referencing our IVES textbook as well as one of Farhat's lectures. And yeah, with that, I will start off with the 3 different main types of funds in governmental accounting. The first one is governmental funds. These are the most similar to what we see in other realms of accounting. They are pretty typical usually. They're funded by taxpayers and grant money, and they fund the various operations of the government. So some of the things they fund would be like fire and police departments, roads, bridges, and different workers' salaries and stuff like that. The second branch is proprietary funds. Proprietary funds are also business-like funds. That would be a good way to think of them. While they are set up by the government and funded by the government to start with, they are usually able to sustain themselves. So with that, examples that we see are public utilities, airports, toll booths, things that make money on their own and don't need to keep being funded by the government, but instead they're funded by their individual uses. And then the third branch we see are fiduciary funds. Those are funds where the specific entity is just a third party or a trustee of the funds. And examples would be trust and agency funds, where they're taking care of the money in a way, or they are a third party in a way, but the funds they're managing are not their own. With that, I'm just going to give you the specific types of funds we're looking at. There are 9 different types: general, special revenue, capital projects, debt service, permanent, internal service, enterprise, agency, and trust funds. I'll just kind of give you a brief description on each of these, and then we'll look more in depth into some of the examples and just what these all mean. So the first one is the general fund. There is only one general fund per entity, and it is used for normal standard transactions and just for the normal course of business. And then the special revenue fund is the second one. Each government entity will have several different special revenue funds. Like, for example, the city of Roseville would probably have one for parks, one for roads, one for parking lots, stuff like that. Next is capital project funds. They hold the resources needed for the specific funding that is contracted out for roads, buildings, and whatnot. Then there are debt service funds. These exist to pay off outstanding obligations. Permanent funds are those that are, or they are as they sound, and they are not used super often. But if you have different resources that will be held for a long period of time, you may use the permanent fund. And then the next is internal service funds. These deal with what we accountants would often call related party transactions, and they happen like when you buy supplies and then you sell them to different departments within your entity. The next is enterprise funds. These deal with revenues and expenses that are incurred in business operations. Agency funds are those going in and out from other entities and don't contain our own resources, which I kind of touched on earlier. And then trust funds are the last ones we see here, and they are exactly as they sound, and we don't add or draw from them freely. Instead, they often deal with employee pensions and things like that. Now that I've mentioned all of these and kind of given you a brief description of each of them, I would like to go over some examples. For my CPA problem, instead of trying to find a problem that didn't really relate to this necessarily, I found one that was I thought unique and interesting. And basically with it, we are able to put what we have learned about the different funds into practice. And basically I'm going to give you scenarios, and I want you to figure out which fund will be used. I'll have all the possible answers in there, and hopefully you'll be able to guess before I put the next slide on the screen. So here goes. In the first example, A, the city of Roseville collects $2 million of taxes on behalf of the county in which it is located. So which of these different funds do you think this would be? So in this particular example, the answer would be agency. Because these aren't the city of Roseville's funds, instead it's Ramsey County's. the city doesn't own these funds, and with that, it matches the description of an agency fund. So this would be in one of the various agency funds that belongs to the entity. The second problem, B, Roseville spends $3.2 billion in expenses directly related to paving city streets using the proceeds from a city gasoline tax dedicated to road improvements. And also, I realize that billion is a lot, so we'll just say 3.2 million. So looking at this, there are a few different words that could tip you off to what the answer is. And the answer is a special revenue fund. So because the proceeds from this tax were dedicated specifically to road improvements, and the expenses are directly related to paving city streets, you can see those keywords that are mentioned there. This would be considered a special revenue fund. And as I mentioned earlier, special revenue funds can come in, like there are a variety of them. There isn't just one per entity, there are several. So this would be like part of the roads special revenue funds. C, the city earns $400,000 on investments set aside to make payments on the city's outstanding bonds. The bonds finance improvements on Roseville's parks. So there are a few words that also would tip you off on this one. I'll let you think about it for a second. And the answer is debt service. The key word I would say is outstanding, and it finances improvements. So like with the bonds, basically this money is set aside to pay our debts, and that plays right into the word of debt service. Next one, D. Roseville pays a contractor $1 million to construct a new rec center in one of its parks. The keywords here are contractor and construct, and because of that, we see that it would be used in the Capital Projects Fund. The Capital Projects Fund is used for these types of things and basically deals with projects where we're improving our roads or buildings or anything we need to bid out. The last example that we're going to be going through is E, or excuse me, we have E and F. But then E, the city pays $800,000 in salaries and wages to police officers. The key point here is that these are like employee salaries, so they would go directly to the general fund. The last example we now have is F. The city purchases $50,000 of stationery and supplies, which it will then in turn sell to each of the different departments. And this one I talked a little bit about earlier. This would be an internal service fund transaction because the company has, or the entity has bought the stationery and supplies, and then it is selling it to each of its departments, but each of those departments are related and belong to the entity itself. So it's just different in that way. Yeah, with that concludes my presentation. I hope that you were able to enjoy this and that you're able to learn quite a bit about the different funds used in governmental accounting. With that, I just want to give some credit to my sources, our Governmental and Non-for-Profit Accounting book by Ives, and then the lecture that I linked here that I watched from Farhat. So with that, thank you very much. That's all I have for you today.